You know, as we think about Christmas and look at Christmas, and last week we had our brown bag Christmas pageant, which was a lot of fun. And but before that, we began looking at some of the parts of Christmas, the story from Scripture. We saw the angel come to Mary and tell Mary that she was going to be a part of God's plan, that she was going to carry the Son of God. She didn't know what role she could play in that, but God came and gave her Jesus, and she walked with Jesus for those 9 months. And we saw how the angel then came to Joseph and spoke to him in a vision, telling him that what the baby Mary was carrying was God's Son, was Jesus. Told Joseph, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife. So Joseph woke up and immediately went and gathered Mary, and they were married. They went to Bethlehem, as we're going to look on Tuesday, because of the edict from Rome to go and take part in the census, so you could better pay taxes. But having gone to Bethlehem for this reason, they ended up staying there for a little while, which is what we're going to look at today. In Matthew chapter 2 is where we're going to be. Matthew chapter 2. If you're using a Bible on the pew rack there in front of you, it will be on page 807. 807. And I would encourage you, if you don't have a Bible, please take one of those Bibles home and let that be your Christmas gift from us. We have more Bibles we can replace it with in the office, but everybody needs a Bible they can understand, so please take that home. So Matthew chapter 2, page 807, that's where we're going to be. Starting in verse 1. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem. So Jesus is in Bethlehem. We do learn from history, this Herod who was king died in 4 BC. You say, before Christ. How was Christ born before Christ? Well, the actual year calendar we have today is because one guy set about to figure out all of the dates of hundreds of years before he was born. So he got pretty close figuring out the dates just from the history they had a few hundred years after this took place. He was off just a little bit because we've since discovered that this Herod the king, died in 4 BC. And we know, we'll learn later, that he tries to kill every baby in Bethlehem. Every baby who is 2 years old or younger. So we believe that this was probably 2 years before he died, so somewhere around 6 BC was when Jesus was born. Fast forward now to this moment, here about 4 BC, somewhere in there. Jesus is there in Bethlehem with his family. They've been living there for a couple of years. And it says wise men from the east came to Jerusalem. Now, if you look at your footnotes of your Bible, that phrase, wise men, the literal translation of that's magi. Everybody, you ever heard them called magi before? Magi? Well, that word magi actually comes from the Old Testament, from the book of Daniel. Daniel, the prophet, when he was promoted in the book of Daniel, he was promoted and his title was called Chief Magi. Daniel, in the kingdom of Babylon, was called the Chief Magi, which is very interesting because, Daniel was visited by an angel. And that angel gave Daniel the time frame of the birth of Jesus. You happen to know what that angel's name was who came to Daniel and gave him that time frame? Gabriel. Gabriel came to Daniel, chief magi, and says, keep a lookout, Son of God's coming about this time. So fast forward now, hundreds of years, you've got more magi coming to the time frame of Jesus being born. That's where we are. So these magi show up, these wise men show up to King Herod, verse 2, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. This is also very interesting for a couple of reasons. There's several attempted explanations about this star rising and star moving. People say it was a comet or it was, conjunction of planets and all this stuff. But if you go back and look, none of those things actually really fit the exact time frame that this would have taken place. The more logical explanation of a star rising and a star moving through the sky is God did it. Is God supernaturally did it. I mean, if God can supernaturally bring Jesus into the world, how easy is it for him just to make a celestial body appear to move? Whether it's an actual star or it's an angel or whatever, that's not the issue. The issue is that God did it. And these wise men have been looking for it, saw it, and in the process came and showed up at King Herod's court. And they said, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews?" And that phrase right there would have caused the hairs on the back of his neck to stand up. You see, Herod called himself the King of the Jews. Herod worked for the Roman government. Herod wasn't actually a Jew. The Jews descended from Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. Herod was descended from Jacob's brother Esau. Herod tried to do a bunch of stuff for the Jews so they would like him. Herod built this massive temple in Jerusalem. It was supposed to be more opulent and bigger than King Solomon's temple, because Herod wanted the Jews to like him, wanted the Jews to look to him as a leader. But the Jews didn't like him, because they called Herod the pretender king. They called Herod the half-Jew, because he was Esau, not Jacob, descended from. They didn't like him very much. And so Herod, who called himself king, called himself he wished he was born king, but he wasn't a born king. He was a self-described king. And so now these guys from the east are coming, and they're saying, "We're looking for the born king." And that makes Herod a little worried. See, something else you got to know about Herod is he's extremely paranoid. So much so that he's afraid anybody and everybody is out to take his throne. He's got a bunch of wives. He kills his favorite wife because he thinks she's going to take his throne. He kills his oldest son because he's afraid he's going to take his throne. He became so notorious for killing everybody because he was so paranoid that even Caesar said it would be better to be one of Herod's dogs than to be one of his family members. And so this is who Herod is. And these guys from the east, and Herod, again, from the east, had been attacked from the east. He had set up a bunch of border cities, these fortresses, to keep the east out from coming in to his kingdom because he was afraid. Now you've got these magi coming from the east with their entourage looking for a born king. Herod immediately is angry and worried, is afraid, and he's trying to conspire how he's going to kill whoever he needs to kill to stop this mess. And so these magi are there. Where's the born king? Verse 3. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. You see, when Herod's troubled, everybody's troubled. When Herod's worried, everybody's worried. Because when Herod gets worried, heads start to roll. And so the whole town is worried now, because Herod is worried about what's coming, worried about the possibility of what is going to be. Verse 4, so he tries to get to the bottom of this. And assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea. For so it is written by the prophet, 'And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel.'" Now, this is fascinating for a bunch of reasons. Because Bethlehem, they're in Jerusalem. Bethlehem's just a few miles away, handful of miles. They could have walked it, in a morning. Herod, these religious leaders don't go to Bethlehem to see the possibility of the Messiah being born. But what's also fascinating is Herod doesn't go with an army to Bethlehem to just wipe everybody out. You would think he would. But you've got to also see it from Herod's perspective. If these magi from the east have come to see the born king, Herod might be afraid that the born king's already got an army. And he doesn't want to go down there yet. He wants to see what's going on before he commits anything to Bethlehem. So verse 7, then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. This is where Herod figures out that the baby's about 2 years old. Star's been in the sky about 2 years. And he sent them, verse 8, to Bethlehem, saying, go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him. So obviously we know the story. We know Herod's straight lying to these guys. They don't know Herod. I mean, they may have heard stories of Herod. But he says, I want you to find the child, send word to me, and then I will show up and I will worship alongside you there, this newborn king, this new Messiah. And so the wise men, whatever they think of Herod, they take his word. Verse 9, after listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. So the star moves. And when they saw the star, when it stopped, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. They rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. It's excessive joy, just explosive joy. They can't control it kind of joy. Explodes out of them. Verse 11. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasure, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. So the wise men, the magi, the three kings, although we don't know exactly how many there were, we determined 3 because of the number of gifts, but it could have been any number of wise men, magi. So they show up and they walk into the house that they're, obviously Mary and Joseph would have bought a house. They've been there for 2 years. They walk in and there's Mary and there's Jesus. Joseph isn't there at the moment, at least from what we can tell. Maybe he shows up after a while. Joseph is still around because we see him later on in the story at the end of the chapter. But the Magi walk in. Now imagine the scene. If you're a young mother with your 2-year-old baby who you know is the Messiah, and these Magi walk in, undoubtedly in their robes, with their entourage, with however they're dressed, and they immediately drop down and start worshiping the child. Now she had some semblance of this back when the shepherds showed up and the shepherds started worshiping. But it's been a couple of years since that. And now it's happening again with the Magi coming in and doing this, and then going out and bringing in the gifts that they lay out before her and before Jesus and say, we are offering this to Jesus. This is our sacrifice. This is our offering to the new king, to the Messiah, to the Son of God. They worship him some more. And then God tells them in a dream, don't go back to Herod. Go a different way home. And they do. But I want to point your attention back to something that really stood out to me that I don't know if I've recognized before. Back in verse 10, the rejoicing exceedingly with great joy. Now, nothing in Scripture is by accident. It's all there on purpose. And so when it says they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy, the fact that it's repeated, this joy, rejoiced, great joy, it's exceeding, it's abundant, it's massive, it's more than you can express in words. But what really even threw me for a loop as I began to study that phrase, they rejoiced, is the phrase in the original language is actually passive, which means the subject of the verb receives the action. So when it says that the wise men, the Magi, rejoiced exceedingly, they receive the joy. The joy is thrust upon them and they express it in however they can in the moment. It's not something they conjure up. It's not something they fabricate. It's not even something that comes from deep within them that explodes out of them. They're receiving this joy from God because they are looking for Jesus. And they allow the joy to come out. Sometimes when there's moments where joy can come upon us, sometimes our mood or our attitude will suppress the joy. because maybe we want to be angry, or maybe we want to be mad, or maybe we want to be offended, and we're not ready for the joy yet. Like, we still want to be in our mood, we still want to be in our situation, but the joy is coming, but then we'll suppress it and push it down. Or maybe it's the Lord reminding us in our minds, you've got Jesus. You need to stop this mess. You've got Jesus. You don't need to complain like that. You've got Jesus. You've got forgiveness. You need to forgive like I forgave you. And he's reminding us of the source for joy. And at times, maybe I'm not speaking to you. Maybe this is just a self-proclaimed testimony here, that I do that many times. Suppress the joy and focus on the negative. Focus on the problem instead of Jesus. But what happens here is that I love about the fact that Matthew used this phrase, rejoiced exceedingly, receiving the joy, is it something that we all have. If you have Jesus, you have the ultimate source for joy within you, whether you express it or not. Don't raise your hand. Don't point to anybody. I'm just warning you ahead of time. Keep your head face forward, okay? Do you ever know any other Christian who is the biggest sourpuss in the world? Don't look around. I saw some of you people. For real, I just said don't. Some of you looked at who you're sitting by. Y'all are going to have a problem before Christmas. I'm just saying. You definitely need to go to Walmart on the way home. That we tend, even though we have Jesus, we tend to focus on the worst of the worst, on the stuff that is fabricated in our mind. When Jesus died and rose for us, and if he did nothing else, that's enough to last us with joy forever. But I don't know if you know my Jesus, because he does so much more than that. Every single day, every single hour, he is sustaining, he is encouraging, he is supporting, he is strengthening. And so the joy that comes from him is so much more than we ever express. We ought to be living out here, Matthew chapter 2, verse 10, on a constant basis, rejoicing exceedingly with great joy, to the point that that is what is printed on our tombstone. That is what is said at our funeral. Not a bunch of stuff, people trying to strain to say nice stuff about us, because, you say nice stuff at funerals. I've preached many a funeral where the family said, yeah, don't say that, don't say this, don't say that, definitely don't say this. But if we live a life that is rejoicing exceedingly with great joy because of Jesus, everything changes. Everybody around us changes because we're spilling the joy on them. Jesus said this in John chapter 15. He said to his disciples, he said this as he's in the upper room at the Last Supper. He's given them a bunch of teaching, and this is one of those teachings. He said, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. That's remain in my love. Live in my love if you keep my commandments. Just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide, live in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. So following Jesus, obeying Jesus, following his direction, leads to joy. Not just a little bit of joy. Notice the end of the verse. He says that it may be full. Full joy. Now, many of us have never experienced full joy. I mean, sometimes the only way to know what full joy feels like is to compare it to what we think is joy now. We think it's good joy now, but we don't know full joy. Like, have you ever eaten, let's say this, we had hamburgers yesterday. Hamburgers are one of my favorite food, and Katie cooked it, and it was phenomenal. I love hamburgers. But have you ever eaten a hamburger that you thought was a good hamburger, and then you had like a next level hamburger, and you're like, okay, that was garbage, and this is heaven. Like, this is what's going to be served every day. It's like, I remember growing up, we didn't have dessert very often, but sometimes we would. And I remember one time the doctor had given my dad a report, and he was supposed to eat better. And so my mom had gone and bought the diet ice cream. And she didn't show it, but she served it out. Dad took one bite and spit it out. I said, what is this mess? He said, where's the Bluebell? They put it in the freezer, and she put it in the freezer in the garage to hide it. He said, I'm not eating this because I've tasted the good stuff. I don't want this other thing, this fake ice cream. I don't want that. I want the real thing. If it kills me, and I'll die happy. I want the real thing. That's what I was thinking yesterday, eating that hamburger. This is the real thing. I don't want that fake, not good. I want the real thing. If I'm going to take the time to eat it, it better be good. You see, when it comes to real joy, full joy, when you've experienced full joy, none of that fake stuff is going to do it. It's not going to do it for you. It's not going to be enough for you. Full joy. But the key is, again, that put that verse back up there, Tony. When it says may be full, I want to point something out to you. In the original language, that may be full is passive. You will receive the joy to the full. But notice also, whose joy are you receiving? Look at the phrase right before it. Whose joy? It's Jesus' joy. That my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. Your joy that you try to build up within yourself isn't going to fill you up at all. Because any joy that we try to build up is simply happiness, not joy. And happiness ebbs and flows with however we feel in the moment. If we feel bad in the moment, the happiness is wiped out. But if it's Jesus' joy that's filling us up, no matter how we feel in the moment, his joy maintains its strength within us. If we're focused on him, then we're not ebbing and flowing with whatever happens in the moment. We're focused on him, and his joy builds up. Our personal joy may be lacking because we're not filled with his joy. We just need to keep, as he says there, follow his commandments. How do we follow his commandments? We know his word. How do we know his word? You got to read it. Take those reading plans. You got to read it to know it. You got to know it to be filled with his joy and to have that joy within you constantly. You just keep filling and keep filling and keep filling. You say, how much is too full? There is no such thing as too full. I thought, as I was looking at this verse, how many of y'all have like a water dispenser in your fridge? Like you put the cup up there and it shoots water out. Anybody ever had that? Or you ever used one? Well, we've got this fridge that's got a water thing in the door. You know, you put your cup up there. And our youngest, Ethan, is very enthusiastic about getting water. But he's not quite tall enough to see the top of the cup when he holds it up to the fridge. If he's got a clear cup, it's great. But most of his cups are not clear. And he was doing this he did it yesterday. Took his cup, jammed it in that thing. I mean, the little lever is going to break, no doubt. But he jams it in there. The water's shooting in. And he just stands there and he's just guessing. He's talking over here, talking over there, trying to watch the TV around the corner. Got the cup there. Water's sloshing out the top, all in the little tray, all down the fridge, all on the floor. And then he looks at it and then walks off. Where Katie or I'll come and we'll just mop it up and take care of the water, whatever. But the idea is you just keep filling. You just keep filling. You can't see the cap. You don't need to worry about how much is too much. You just keep being filled. Just keep letting it come so that when it's overflowing, it spills everywhere. Is it ever a bad thing to spill joy around you? To spill joy on other people around you? To leak it onto them. Because the thing is, you can leak all the joy you want, but if you're getting your joy from Jesus, you're never going to run out. You're never going to run out. He's going to keep filling you up and keep filling you up and keep filling you up if you're going to him for your source. Once received, once filled, the Lord's joy in us can do far more than just make us happy. This is in Nehemiah chapter 8, spoken to the people of Israel. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Which is a very interesting phrase if you really think about it. Some of you know that verse. Some of you have that memorized in your head. But the joy, try to really think about what that means. The joy of the Lord is your strength. I mean, if it said, the word of the Lord is your strength, okay, it makes sense. I'm going to read more word. If it says, the praise of the Lord is your strength, okay, I'm going to praise more. But he said, the joy of the Lord is your strength. How do you joy more? Like, how do I get more strength? Okay, more joy means more strength. I got that. But the joy of the Lord is my strength. It maintains, it sustains, it holds up, it encourages, it strengthens. I mean, Jesus said, we already saw it in John 15. If you keep my commandments, you'll abide in my love. If you're in my love, with my commandments, following me, my joy will be in you and be full. It made me think of, have you ever worked out before? Let's say you've worked out and you try to lift a weight, or maybe you're doing a bench press. You're trying to do a bench press that's heavier than you normally do. Well, you've got to get somebody to come over and help you with the weight, called a spotter, so that if you're pushing the weight up and you can't get it up, the guy's supposed to come and grab it and pick it up for you. That's the idea of the joy of the Lord being your strength. That it's the ultimate spotter. It encourages us, it empowers us that when the weight of the world is pushing down to crush us, the joy of the Lord lifts it up for us. Takes it right off like it's nothing. Like it doesn't weigh anything. Because he is our joy. Not the situation, like the situation being perfect in our life, our health being perfect, our kids' health being perfect, our family, no controversy, no anger, no bitterness. Some of y'all are already anticipating what Wednesday or Thursday is going to look like and how you're going to have these conversations, how you're going to have that guy sit over there because you don't want to talk about whatever. And you don't want to deal with this. You just want to, drop your sack and leave and not have to deal with any of the conversations that tend to go on at holidays when you see these people that you're connected to by blood. But if the joy of the Lord is your strength, then you're not worried about the conversation. Then you're not allowing the possibility of what could be with the health to drag your mood. If the joy of the Lord is your strength, if you're focused on the joy of Jesus and he's filling you up, then everything you need is in him. And whatever happens in this temporary broken world is just temporary and broken. It can only go up from here. Remember, those wise men, those magi, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. So if they received the joy, what we saw in that John 15 passage, having received the joy, as Jesus said, was his joy in them, filling them, because they were going to Jesus. They were following Jesus. They were pursuing Jesus. You see, you have to follow Jesus to receive his joy. You can't follow 15 other things and still receive joy. You got to follow Jesus to receive joy. Everything else that tries to give you joy is just a cheap imitation of the real thing. It's not the real thing. You have to follow Jesus to receive joy. And once you receive his joy, you receive his strength. You follow Jesus to receive joy, you receive his joy to receive his strength. His strength in you changes you because you're exuding joy. I mean, imagine how this Christmas would be different if every person you see between now and the new year, every person you see explodes with joy. Just imagine it. People aren't elbowing each other in the line at the store to get a little bit in front of them because everybody in DeQueen goes to Walmart now. At the same time, you're not trying to, cut in line. You're not trying to get the closer spot. You're not worried because somebody parked in your Walmart pickup line when you're not picking up. You're just parking there because it's closer to the front door than the other spot. Somebody parked in your spot, and so you're just frustrated. But you're not worried about that because your joy's on Jesus. Not that any of y'all do that, but I'm just saying. Your joy is in Jesus and not that you have to have everything the way you want it. You follow Jesus to receive his joy. You receive his joy, you will receive his strength. And then that changes everything. Simply being in Jesus' presence brings joy. Let me take you to Luke chapter 1 real quick, just one verse on the screen, I think. Do I have that verse, Tony? Luke, yep, there it is. Luke 1:44. When the sound of your greeting came to my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. This is Elizabeth, Mary's relative, talking to her. When Mary walks in carrying the Messiah, the baby Jesus, Elizabeth, her relative, is carrying John the Baptist. And it says when Mary walks in the room with the presence of Jesus, John the Baptist, as a preborn baby, leaps inside of her womb. Katie and I were talking about this last night. I mean, any of you women who have carried a baby, you felt the baby move. You felt the baby kick. You felt the baby punch. You felt the baby twist. Have you ever felt the baby jump? I mean, like, it says leaped. Don't you know that freaked Elizabeth out? But she could tell this isn't just a normal kick. This isn't a normal punch. This isn't a normal twirl. This is a leap inside of her, jumping for joy because the Son of God is in the room. The presence of Jesus changes everything. And if we're focused on the presence of Jesus, if we're pursuing the presence of Jesus, if we're following Jesus, then we will receive his joy. And having received his joy, we receive his strength. So those are the questions then. Do you want the strength of the Lord? Do you want the joy of the Lord? Do you want to follow the Lord? To follow him. Not just say, oh yeah, I follow Jesus, whatever, man. But do you really want to follow him? Do you really want to dedicate your life to him, upend your life to him, and experience the strength, experience the joy? Then you have to believe in him. Believe that he died. Believe that he rose. So all your sins are forgiven. So you can spend forever with him in heaven. Will you believe in that today? Believe in Jesus today. You see, in just a minute, we're going to take the Lord's Supper together, take communion together. And the primary act of following the Lord, expressing his joy, is constantly remembering what he's done for you. And this is an expression of that, a tool of remembrance. And so right now, maybe you've taken the Lord's Supper before, or maybe you've just been to church before, maybe you've never been to church before, but you've never believed in Jesus before. And so taking the Lord's Supper, there's nothing for you to remember because you haven't been saved yet. But if you believe in Jesus right now and you take the Lord's Supper, imagine that, believing in Jesus moments later taking the Lord's Supper as a celebration, as a worship and a praise offering to him. So I want everybody to bow your heads. We are going to offer the invitation to anybody who would believe before we do this. To secure your eternity, to know Jesus for all time, I'm going to ask you, you just simply need to believe Jesus is God's Son. He died so all of your sins would be forgiven. And then he rose from the dead so you can live after you die.